just going to warn everybody, I start out a little grim, but we move into less grim places, so don't lose hope. Okay. We are living in times of unprecedented suffering. While stress is part of the human condition, this moment is unique. Our personal pain is playing out in cultural conversations. Technology has given us access to the daily indignities and the ugliest parts of our humanity. COVID came knocking on our doors. We changed our lives to accommodate this invisible and potent intruder. As of last evening, 980,000 deaths from COVID-19 were calculated in the United States. This is more people than live in the city limits of Austin, Texas, Baltimore, Maryland, Indianapolis, Indiana, Jacksonville, Florida, Milwaukee, Minnesota, and Tucson, Arizona. That's almost 1 million people. Concurrent to the start of the pandemic, a centuries-old epidemic of violence, fatal violence, to Black and brown people reached an inflection point. Early in 2020, we had many Black lives that we lost. We've lost many Black lives over a long time, but George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, killed by deadly force, brought the nation to our knees. It did indeed synergize public consciousness to a new level that had not previously been seen. We have long neglected systemic patterns of abuse and injustice, but now we're less able to look away. In the wake of this, we experienced fragmentation, polarization, already at a fever pitch, but escalating further. As a polarized culture takes hold, the national appetite for change surges and then recedes. I'm holding too many things here. All right, there we go. We retreated from debate, and the work of large-scale justice and community building came to a screeching halt. Finally, we learn in a recent Washington Post article that a nationwide study shows that 44% of teenagers report persistent sadness and hopelessness. More than half of BIPOC students have been targeted with racist encounters, and half of all LGBTQ teens have contemplated suicide. Seriously contemplated. Our children are crushed under the weight of our inhumane behavior. These statistics are inexcusable. When will the grown-ups show up? Is there some way that we can move forward, suffer less, and not retreat into denial? In my work as a social worker, a community activist, a professor here in multicultural psychology, and as a family member, I have come to understand that really what we want in life is safety, health, and lives filled with a sense of belonging, care, and purpose. And yet, we fill our days with our own experiences, the stories of other people's experiences, and news reports that are filled with harm, fear, illness, isolation, rejection, disrespect, and dissatisfaction. So, here I just want to share a little bit about where I'm coming from. So, understanding our cognitions and psychology, I want to first identify 3 biological imperatives that we just don't get to argue with. There they are. So fear is a natural response to stress. It's to be expected. Our brain is wired to protect us in service of our survival. And connection and care, it's a human need. We come into the world and we require it throughout our whole life course. It's part of our health and well-being. This connection and care, I'm way oversimplifying here, is governed by part of our brain called mirror neurons. And these mirror neurons allow us to stand in another person's shoes, allows us to dig deep and find the empathy within us to understand what another person could be thinking. I'm also coming through from a space where I talk about 2 different ways in which our mind operates. There are more, again, oversimplification, but there's conscious and unconscious. So our conscious mind is rational, it's intentional. It actually uses a ton of energy. So when you're thinking and you're tired, there's a good reason. It's solution-oriented, and it invites change, kind of grows and thrives on change. Our unconscious mind really looks at ways to be as speedy and efficient as possible, but what we lose in that process is accuracy. So we have intuitive responses, we're not even aware of them, and those are built on what I call, or many people call, cognitive shortcuts. So, taking all of this together, we come to understand, I hope, I've made it clear, that we are at the mercy of a complex network of competing needs. We want to protect ourselves from getting hurt. We want to connect, right? It's like lots of things happening here. So, we live in a fast-paced world, and we really deeply, especially in the United States, feel a kind of pressure to produce results. We experience our worth as measured against a fantasy that we can do everything on time, completely, and with minimal disruption or effort. We really like the I'm totally awesome, but I didn't have to work very hard thing. Okay, so, oh, sorry everybody. Our efforts to meet the impossible standards end up leaving us dehumanized. We lose ourselves, sort of trying to become automatons, or what I like to call widgets. So, if you will, I just want to, if you will join me. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. If you're not, you just find a space in front of you. And I'd like you to imagine that you're in a car or a vehicle on the highway. Perhaps you're coming home from work. Perhaps you're on a bus going to New York City. And you're just going along. Maybe you're thinking about what you want to have for dinner. You're listening to music or maybe the news. And you think to yourself, whoa, what exit did I just pass? Or you think, how did I get back in this lane? You're just going. You're just on autopilot. You're going with the flow of traffic. So then all of a sudden, bam, all sea of red lights, okay? And traffic. Oh, seriously? Today? Why? Why me? Oh. As far as you can see are all the careless, thoughtless people that are in your way as you're trying to get where you want to go. So, why we experience this as if the traffic is happening to us. But what if we are the traffic? I feel like something's happening with this. I'm scared. Okay, you can hear me. Hello? All right, something's funky. We'll hope it doesn't get too messed up. Okay, so in that process of assuming that we are being acted upon by the traffic, as opposed to really owning the fact that we and everybody else around us are in this together, in our shared humanity, the same place, the same time, we essentially get uncomfortable because we're trying to talk. Okay, I'm sorry. We abdicate our agency, and we engage in a kind of magic thinking. We either play the victim, or we feel like the helpless child who's waiting to be rescued by that superhero who never comes. So if we aren't being harmed, but rather we are in the milieu with everybody else, and this misery that we experience and the onslaught of everything that comes at us all the time, is it possible that we are also the misery? And so instead of locating the problem over there, or over here, or with this microphone, it is possible, could we consider that we possess the problem, but we also possess the solution? Ha-ha! We get to have some sense of capacity in navigating what's happening to us. And that's important. So, great idea, Polly. Fantastic. All right, let's go with it. But remember how I talked about the unconscious mind and cognitive shortcuts that are made and how it can be inaccurate? There's two cognitive shortcuts that I want to share with you, and they impede our ability to really take in our capacity to engage with agency. And they impede our ability to suffer less. Now, does that make sense? We want to suffer less, but these cognitive biases intended to help us are actually kind of hurting us. So, the first one is that we assume we have all the facts or a full understanding of the situation. So, again, with the traffic, I'm going somewhere, I'm in the car, there's a lot of pedestrians, I come to a stoplight, just waiting, do-do-do. It turns green. Now there's a car in front of me, and I can't really see what's going on, but they're not moving. So little tap of the honk, they don't move. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? Jesus, can't you figure this out? Like, go, it's green, guy, or lady, or person in any form. And I'm just kind of losing it and spiraling, right? And then all of a sudden, a little elderly woman with a walker and her bag of groceries is making her way across the street. And I realize that that car wasn't going because they were being generous. And if I had been in their position, I too would have been generous. But I was going down a whole rabbit hole that was about a story that I assumed I knew, which was the person driving the car in front of me didn't realize the light was green. That clearly wasn't the case. So what I like to say is that we don't know what we don't know. Okay. The second cognitive bias is that we presume that an anonymous other, anybody who I don't know who's out there, doesn't deserve my best. In fact, we often think of an anonymous other and we give less to them. So this is the third and final traffic story. My partner and I were in Cambridge, Massachusetts, not too far from where we live, and we were taking a left turn off of a very busy intersection. And as we're taking the left turn, I realized, oh dear, there's a car coming in oncoming traffic. And so I sort of gun the car, and then just as I'm gunning the car, some pedestrian comes, steps off the curb, and starts to walk across the street. I have to slam on the brakes, and I am so irritated. And in a adrenaline-fueled great amount of aggravation, I may have let out a couple choice words. And then my partner says, "Oh, it's Tom." And I said, "Tom? Oh, Tom!" So we realize it's our very good friend Tom who's crossing the street. And all of a sudden, we're smiles and giggles, and I'm driving and leaning out the window and being like, "You guys have to come over for dinner," right? And then I'm in a great mood, and so too is my partner. So not until a little while later do I spend a little time thinking about, whoa, my mood instantaneously shifted. And it puzzled me. But what I found is, as I thought more about it, there's an important truth that I really saw that pedestrian as entitled. Like, what are you doing crossing the street right in front of my car? Oh, it's 12. I better hurry. Okay. And I was offended. I was like, no way. This is not acceptable. So here we are. Me, you, us, them, either or. We learn about difference early. Research shows that 9-month-old babies can tell difference. Toddlers make sense of the world around them, which is overwhelming, by creating binary understanding of the world. So, while this construct helps the toddler and gets us relatively far, it doesn't translate very well into adulthood. It's oversimplified. It doesn't work for our complex world. So, what I propose is a new model of understanding, and this ideal framework would support our natural curiosity and keep us engaged with questions so that we're not assuming we know everything. And it would allow us to tolerate, as I said, that we don't know what we don't know, and that we don't know all the answers. And it would allow us to authentically connect with one another. So I now understand my experience with the anonymous pedestrian, Tom. It was an innate negative response to what is called cognitive drag. Cognitive drag. So it pulled me out of my flow, and I was offended, and I was entitled to having an unencumbered trip. And a lot of us believe that we're entitled to an unencumbered life, but it doesn't work that way. So, if we befriend this part of ourselves that can be pretty selfish and self-interested, we find this unappealing trait is hard to admit. It brings up shame when we're called on it. We don't want to hear it. We resist. But we can disarm the shame, and we can empower our compassion and our generosity when we choose to be generous with ourselves. So, with that, I would like to have you please consider what I'm calling a pledge for humanity. Listen to it, and then afterwards I'll ask you if you're ready to agree. Sign on, okay? I will meet my fears with curiosity. If I cause harm through my judgments or careless behavior, I will do the necessary work to rehumanize those I have hurt, including strangers. I am ready to know the history I carry in my bones. I want to hear the wisdom of my voice, and I invite the gifts which I sow from the soil. I humbly engage, listen, share, and notice my power. I bring compassion for myself and for others to this work. The wide chasms, I've completely forgotten to do any of this. The wide chasms of difference between us and them, me and you, will transform empty space between us into a bridge that connects us to our collective humanity. So the wide chasms of difference between us and them, you and me, will transform empty space between us into the bridge that connects us to our collective humanity. So I don't know if you can see here, but this is the same road. Pretty sure it's in Norway or Denmark. So it looks like that truck is about to drive off the edge of a cliff practically, yeah? It's like driving into a chasm. But then we move to a different vantage point, and all of a sudden a bridge emerges, and our path to the future is clear. So, is anybody here willing to take this pledge with me? I see a couple hands. All right, awesome. That makes me really happy to hear. What I ask is that you do your best with it. Be gentle with yourself when you don't do an awesome job with it, and return to the pledge. So, the late Bishop Desmond Tutu, a leader and expert in the truth and reconciliation process, who sought to address the lasting impact of injustices that stemmed from apartheid in South Africa, introduced many people to the concept of Ubuntu. I guess the slides didn't really work for me this time. Ubuntu is the essence of being human, and it highlights our interdependence. So do what you do well. It spreads out into the world and is given to the whole of humanity.